They say I seduced Rome with beauty and magic. The truth? I never needed to set foot in their marble city to bring the most powerful men in the world to their knees. From within these palace walls in Alexandria, I wove a web so intricate, so intoxicating, that Rome itself became my prisoner. This is the story of how I made an empire bow without ever leaving my throne. My name is Cleopatra, and this is how I bewitched Rome.
My name is Cleopatra VII Philippator, though history will remember me by many names: seductress, sorceress, queen, manipulator. Let them call me what they wish. I know who I am. I am the last pharaoh of Egypt, daughter of the Ptolemaic dynasty, fluent in 9 languages, scholar of mathematics and philosophy, and yes, a woman who understood something that men have always feared, that true power does not come from muscles or swords, but from the mind and the carefully chosen word. Let me take you back to a time when I was 28 years old, ruling from my magnificent palace in Alexandria. The year was 41 BC, and Rome was tearing itself apart after the assassination of Julius Caesar. My dear Caesar, my lover, my partner in ambition, was gone. Brutus and Cassius, his murderers, had been defeated at Philippi, and now Rome had new masters. 3 men who called themselves the Second Triumvirate: Octavian, Caesar's cold and calculating heir; Lepidus, the weak link already fading into irrelevance; and Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony, the charismatic general who now controlled the eastern provinces and thought himself master of all he surveyed. Antony sent me a summons. Can you imagine? A summons? As if I were some provincial governor who needed to explain myself. He wanted to meet me in Tarsus, in Cilicia, to question my loyalty during the recent civil war. The audacity of it made me laugh, but it also made me think. You see, I had a problem. Actually, I had several problems, but let me tell you about the 2 that kept me awake at night in those warm Egyptian evenings. The macro challenge, the one that threatened everything I had built. Rome was circling Egypt like a vulture. My kingdom was wealthy beyond imagination, the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, filled with gold and grain and ancient knowledge. Every Roman general looked at Egypt and saw not a sovereign nation, but a prize waiting to be claimed. If I did not secure a powerful protector, if I did not bind Rome to me with chains they could not see, Egypt would be swallowed whole. My children would be paraded through Roman streets. My dynasty would end. The smaller problem, the immediate one, Antony's summons. If I ignored it, I looked weak and rebellious. If I went crawling to Tarsus like an obedient subject, I established myself as beneath him. And if I appeared beneath him, I was finished. Every negotiation that followed would be from a position of weakness. But here is what fascinated me about this challenge. I realized I did not need to conquer Rome with armies. I did not need to march through their streets or storm their senate. What I needed was to make Rome come to me, to make them need me, to make them obsess over me, to turn their own strength into my weapon. In this story, you will meet several key players in this dangerous game. First, Marcus Antonius himself, Mark Antony. Imagine a man in his early 40s, tall and powerfully built, with the body of a soldier who has spent his life in military camps. His face is handsome in that rugged, masculine way Romans admire. Strong jaw, broad forehead, dark curling hair beginning to show silver at the temples. He dresses like a soldier even when playing politician, preferring practical tunics to togas. But his eyes, His eyes are what tell you everything. They are hungry eyes, eyes that want wine, women, glory, and most of all, to be loved. Antony is a man of enormous appetites and enormous insecurities, and I knew from the moment I heard about him that he was someone I could work with. Then there is Octavian, though he barely appears in this tale directly. His shadow hangs over everything. Caesar's 19-year-old grandnephew and adopted son, cold where Antony is warm, calculating where Antony is impulsive, thin and frequently ill, but with eyes like chips of ice. He waits in Rome, consolidating power, watching Antony in the east, the future emperor, though he does not use that title yet. You will meet Dellius, Antony's messenger and spy, a Greek freedman with clever eyes and an obsequious manner that hides a sharp intelligence. He dresses in fine Roman clothes, but speaks with the accent of Smyrna. He is the kind of man who survives by reading the room perfectly. And you will meet members of my own court. Charmian, my handmaiden and closest friend since childhood, a woman of Nubian descent with dark skin that glows like polished ebony, wise eyes, and an ability to read people that rivals my own. She wears the fine linen of the Egyptian court, always in deep blues and silvers. Apollodorus, my Sicilian advisor and occasional spy, broad-shouldered and bearded, fiercely loyal, who once smuggled me into Caesar's presence rolled in a carpet. And Iris, another handmaiden, younger than Charmian, with honey-colored skin and quick fingers that can arrange hair, mix cosmetics, or slip poison into wine with equal skill. The setting for most of this story is my palace in Alexandria, and I need you to see it as I saw it then. The royal quarter sprawls across the eastern harbor, a complex of buildings made of white limestone and marble that seems to glow in the Mediterranean sun. My private chambers overlook the sea, with tall windows that let in the salt breeze. The floors are mosaics depicting scenes from Egyptian mythology, and the walls are painted with gold leaf and lapis lazuli. I have a private library connected to the Great Library of Alexandria, filled with scrolls from every corner of the known world. The palace has gardens with fountains, pools filled with lotus flowers, courtyards with columns carved to look like papyrus reeds. At night, oil lamps and torches turn everything golden and amber. But I also spent time in my working chamber, a smaller room most visitors never saw. Here I kept my correspondence, my maps, my intelligence reports from agents across the Mediterranean. Here I studied philosophy and astronomy. Here I calculated grain shipments and tax revenues. Here I truly ruled, not from the throne room, but from this intimate space filled with the tools of statecraft. So here is the situation I faced. Rome wanted to dominate me, but Rome also needed me. They needed Egyptian grain. They needed Egyptian gold. They needed the legitimacy that came from the oldest continuing civilization in the world, acknowledging their authority. What if I could make them need me even more? What if I could make myself not just useful, but irresistible? What if I could turn Antony into my weapon, pointed at Octavian, protecting Egypt while the two most powerful men in Rome destroyed each other? That was my plan. To bewitch Rome without leaving my palace. To make Antony come to Egypt, fall so deeply under my spell that he would choose me over Rome itself, and in doing so, create a shield around my kingdom that no army could penetrate. You are probably wondering, did I succeed? Well, you will have to listen to find out. But I can tell you this, the game I played was more dangerous, more intricate, and more thrilling than anything you can imagine. There were moments when I held the fate of empires in my hands. Moments when one wrong word would have meant death. Moments when I questioned everything I thought I knew about power, love, and survival. This is not a story about magic or supernatural seduction. This is a story about intelligence, strategy, and understanding human nature better than anyone else in the room. This is the story of how I, Cleopatra, made Rome mine without ever leaving Egypt. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, to the day Dellius arrived at my palace with Antony's summons in his hand and confidence in his step. He thought he was summoning a nervous queen to justify herself. He had no idea he was about to become the first piece in a game that would change the world.
It was late afternoon when Dellius arrived, and I remember the quality of the light. In Alexandria, the sun at that hour turns everything amber and rose gold, softening the harsh white of the marble and making the sea look like hammered bronze. I was in my private garden when Charmian came to tell me a Roman envoy had arrived, requesting an immediate audience. I smiled. Demanding, not requesting, I thought. But I said nothing. I was sitting beside the fountain, a circular pool surrounded by blue lotus flowers. The sound of falling water always helped me think. I wore a simple linen dress that day, pale green like young papyrus, with my hair loose down my back. No crown, no jewels, just me, a scrawl of Heraclitus in my lap, and the afternoon sun. "Let him wait," I told Charmian. "Serve him wine in the formal receiving room. Good wine, mind you. I want him comfortable and slightly confused about whether he is being honored or dismissed." Charmian laughed, a low, rich sound. She understood immediately. She was 32 years old then, 4 years older than me, and had been with me since we were children. Her mother had been my mother's handmaiden. Charmian wore her hair in elaborate braids wrapped around her head like a crown, decorated with small golden beads that caught the light when she moved. Her dress was Egyptian style, a long sheath of the finest linen in deep purple, with a collar of silver and turquoise. She had a way of standing absolutely still that made people underestimate her, but her mind was always working, always observing. "How long shall I make him wait, my queen?" she asked. I considered. Too short, and I seemed eager or nervous. Too long, and I seemed petty or afraid. 1 hour, I said. Long enough to make the point that I grant audiences when I choose, not when summoned. Short enough that he cannot claim I insulted Rome. While Dellius waited, I prepared. You must understand something about me. Many people, especially men, thought my power came from my appearance. They talked about my beauty as if it were magic, as if I had cast some spell. The truth is more interesting and more insulting to those men. I was attractive, yes, but not extraordinarily so. I had seen far more beautiful women. What I had was something more dangerous. I understood presentation. I understood theater. I understood that power is partly real and partly performance, and the performance is often more important than the reality. So I went to my chambers to prepare, and Iris was waiting. Iris was 23, younger than both Charmian and me, with skin the color of honey and enormous dark eyes that made her look perpetually innocent. She was anything but innocent. Her fingers were the most skilled in the palace at cosmetics, hair arrangement, and the subtle art of making someone look exactly as powerful or as vulnerable as the situation required. She wore lighter colors than Charmian, usually white or pale yellow, with her black hair cut short in the latest Alexandria fashion. Around her wrists she wore dozens of thin golden bangles that chimed softly when she moved. "The Roman," she said as I entered. It was not a question. "The Roman," I confirmed. "What does one wear to reject a summons while appearing to comply with it?" Eris's eyes sparkled. She loved these puzzles. You want him to report back that you came when called, but that he could not help feeling you were the one in control. Exactly.
She moved through my wardrobe with quick, decisive movements. My chambers were large, with high ceilings painted to look like the night sky, complete with golden stars and the constellation of Isis. The bed was enormous, draped with silk from China in deep crimson and purple. Against one wall stood wardrobes made of Lebanese cedar, inlaid with ivory and gold. Against another, tables holding cosmetics, perfumes, and jewelry organized with military precision. The windows faced the sea, and even now I could hear the waves and smell the salt air mixed with jasmine from the gardens below. "Not the gold," Iris murmured, pushing aside an ornate dress stiff with gold thread. "Too much. Not the simple linen, too little. Ah, this." She pulled out a dress that made me smile. It was Egyptian style, made of the finest royal linen so light it was almost transparent, dyed a deep purple that was nearly black. Over it, a sheer overdress of white silk that created an effect like moonlight on water. The dress left my arms bare and was held at the shoulders with clasps shaped like falcons, the symbol of Horus. It was sophisticated, expensive, unmistakably royal, but also sensual without being obvious. More importantly, it was completely Egyptian, not a single element of Greek or Roman style. A subtle message. While Eris worked on my appearance, Charmian returned with information. This was our system, worked out over years. Charmian handled intelligence and observation. Eris handled presentation and physical preparation. Apollodorus handled security and anything requiring muscle or intimidation. Together, we were formidable. "His name is Quintus Dellius," Charmian reported, settling onto a cushioned stool near my cosmetics table. "Greek by birth, from Smyrna. He is a freedman who worked his way up through various Roman patrons. He served with Dolabella, then Cassius, and now Antony. He has a reputation for switching sides at opportune moments." "A survivor," I said. "Indeed. He speaks excellent Greek, adequate Egyptian, and perfect Latin. He drinks the wine slowly, I noticed, wanting to keep his wits. He examines everything in the room. He is nervous, but hiding it well."
"He compares himself to Dionysus," Dellius said. "He likes to be called the new Dionysus when he is in Greece and Asia. He throws festivals, dramatic celebrations. Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and abandon. A man who wanted to be seen as a god of pleasure and freedom. Interesting. And useful." "And what does he think of me?" I asked. Dellius hesitated. "He has heard the stories about your intelligence, your beauty, your relationship with Caesar. He is curious, but he is also suspicious. He wonders if you supported Cassius and Brutus during the Civil War." "I supported Egypt," I said flatly. "I sent ships to help Dolabella, who was loyal to Caesar's memory. Some of those ships were diverted by weather and politics, but my loyalty was never to Caesar's murderers." "That is what I will tell him." "No," I said. "That is what I will tell him, personally." I stood, and everyone in the room stood with me. "Return to Tarsus, Dellius. Tell Marcus Antonius that I will meet with him, but not there. Tell him that if he wishes to discuss matters with the Queen of Egypt, he should come to Egypt. Tell him that I will receive him in Alexandria with all the honor due to Rome's representative in the East. Tell him that I guarantee his safety, his comfort, and a discussion that will be worth his time." Dellius looked uncertain. "Your Majesty, I am not sure he will accept. The summons specifically requested your presence in Tarsus." "Then you will have to persuade him," I said with a smile. "You are skilled at persuasion, I think. But tell him this as well. Tell him that Cleopatra does not come when summoned like a subject, but she does welcome powerful friends as equals. Tell him that if he wants Egypt's wealth,
Egypt's grain, and Egypt's alliance, he should be willing to travel a bit to secure it. And tell him, I paused, considering, tell him that Cleopatra is far more interesting than anything he will find in Tarsus. The next morning, Delius left for Tarsus, his ship loaded with gifts, gold, fine linens, and perfumes. I watched from my windows as his ship sailed west, and I felt the first flutter of anticipation mixed with fear. I had made my move. Now I would see if Antony was the man I thought he was. Charmian found me there looking out at the sea. "Do you think he will come?" she asked. "He will come," I said. "He is too curious not to. And besides, I am betting on something." "What?" "That Antony is tired of being the second. Second to Caesar during the Civil War, second to Octavian in the Triumvirate. He wants to feel like the most important man in the world. And I am offering him that feeling. In Tarsus, surrounded by his army, he is just another Roman commander. But here he can be a god welcomed by a goddess. He will come. And if he does not, then I would have no choice but to go to Tarsus, and my position would be weaker. But I did not say that. He will come, I repeated. While we waited for Antony's response, I prepared. This is where the small problem came into play, the immediate challenge that threatened to derail everything before it began. You see, I was not the only one who understood the value of Egypt and the danger of Rome. There were factions in my own court, nobles who thought I was being too accommodating to Rome, or not accommodating enough. And there was one man in particular who was becoming a serious problem. His name was Ganymedes, and he had been my younger sister Arsinoe's chief advisor during her rebellion against me years ago. After I defeated Arsinoe and Caesar executed her in Rome, I had foolishly allowed Ganymedes to live because he claimed loyalty to me. I thought I could use his administrative skills. I was wrong. He had been gathering support among the more xenophobic Egyptian nobles, the ones who hated the Ptolemaic dynasty's connections to Greece and Rome, who wanted a purely Egyptian ruler. I learned about his plotting 3 days after Delius left, when Apollodorus came to my chambers late at night. Apollodorus was a big man, standing over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms like tree trunks. He was Sicilian by birth, with olive skin weathered by sun and wind, a full black beard streaked with gray, and eyes that never stopped moving. He had been with me for 8 years and had saved my life more than once. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. Apollodorus never wasted words. I set down the scroll I was reading. It was late, past midnight, and I had been working in my study. This smaller room was my favorite place in the palace, lined with shelves of scrolls and tablets, with a large table covered in maps and correspondence. Oil lamps cast a golden glow, and incense burned in a corner, filling the air with myrrh. Ganymedes, I guessed. Ganymedes. He met tonight with Lord Patenophote and 3 other nobles. One of my people overheard. They are planning to present a petition to you demanding that you refuse Antony if he comes, that you align Egypt with Parthia instead of Rome. I rubbed my eyes. Parthia, the great empire to the east, Rome's only serious rival. Some Egyptians had fantasized about playing Rome and Parthia against each other, securing our independence by balancing between 2 powers. It was naive. Parthia was too far away and too alien. Rome was on our doorstep. There was no scenario where cozying up to Parthia would end with Roman legions crossing our borders. "How many nobles are with him?" I asked. "At least a dozen openly. Perhaps twice as that in sympathy." Not good. Not catastrophic, but not good. If they presented their petition publicly, it would undermine my authority and signal division to Rome. Antony would hear about it and wonder if I could deliver Egypt's support, even if I promised it. "What do you recommend?" I asked Apollodorus. "Arrest Ganymedes tonight. Execute him tomorrow. Make it clear that treason has consequences." It was the Roman solution. Quick, brutal, effective, and it would absolutely work as a short-term fix. But I shook my head. If I execute him, I make him a martyr. The nobles who support him would be terrified into silence, yes, but they would also hate me more. And worse, Antony would hear that Cleopatra solves problems by executing her own nobles? What does that say about my security, about my control? It looks desperate. Then what? Apollodorus asked. I need to outmaneuver him, not just crush him. I need to make his position look foolish, not dangerous. Can you arrange for me to accidentally encounter him tomorrow, somewhere public but not formal? Apollodorus smiled. He understood. The Temple of Isis? You were planning to make an offering tomorrow for the festival. Perfect. Make sure Ganymedes knows I will be there. Make sure there are many witnesses. The next day, I went to the Temple of Isis in the heart of Alexandria. The temple was magnificent, one of the largest in the city, with massive pylons covered in hieroglyphs and reliefs showing the goddess in her many forms. Inside, the air was thick with incense, and priests chanted in ancient Egyptian. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating dust motes and making the gold and paint on the walls seem to glow. I wore full royal regalia, a pleated linen dress of the purest white, a collar of gold and carnelian, and the dual crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. I was not just a Ptolemaic queen, I was pharaoh, the living incarnation of Isis. I made my offering, expensive incense and oil, and prayed aloud in Egyptian. The gathered nobles and priests watched. And there, toward the back, was Ganymedes. He was a thin man, with a nervous energy, dressed in fine Egyptian clothes, but somehow never looking comfortable in them. His face was narrow with a pointed beard, and his eyes darted around constantly. After the ceremony, as I was leaving, I made sure to walk past him. As if noticing him for the first time, I stopped. "Ganymedes," I said warmly, "how pleasant to see you. Are you well?" He bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty, I am well."
I am glad. You served my sister, did you not, before she was misguided in her ambitions? A dangerous topic, but I kept my voice pleasant, curious. The surrounding nobles leaned in, listening. I did, Your Majesty. I served Egypt as best I could. Of course. And now you serve Egypt still. Tell me, you are a learned man. What do you think Egypt needs most in these troubled times? He had not expected this. His eyes narrowed. Security, Your Majesty. Independence. Yes, exactly. Security and independence. I agree completely. Tell me, how do you think we achieve that? Egypt is wealthy, but our army is small. Rome is strong. Parthia is distant. How does Egypt secure her independence? I was not attacking him. I was asking his opinion as if I genuinely wanted to know. This was the trap. Ganymedes saw the audience and could not resist. Perhaps, Your Majesty, by not appearing too eager to please Rome, by showing that Egypt has options. Options, yes. Parthia, you mean. I nodded thoughtfully. I have considered that. Tell me, if we allied with Parthia, how long do you think it would take for Rome to invade? 3 months? 6? Rome might not invade if they knew Parthia would defend us. Might not, but probably would. And Parthia is 2 months' march away. By the time Parthian help arrived, Alexandria would be in Roman hands, and I would be dead or in chains. Do you disagree? He could not disagree. The logic was too obvious. Perhaps Your Majesty could negotiate from a position of strength. Ah, a position of strength. And what creates that position? Not empty threats of distant allies. What creates strength is being essential, making Rome need us more than we need them, making ourselves too valuable to conquer. Do you see? I could see understanding dawning on some of the noble faces.
Ganymedes had made Egypt's situation sound simple: refuse Rome, embrace Parthia. I was showing it was far more complex. "I appreciate your concern for Egypt," I said, putting a hand briefly on his shoulder, a queen's touch, implying approval, connection. "We all want the same thing. We want Egypt to survive, to thrive. I promise you, everything I do, every decision I make, is for Egypt. Trust me." And then I left, leaving him standing there with nothing to say that would not sound like defiance of a queen who had just publicly aligned herself with him. Later, Charmian laughed when I told her the full plan. "You made him look like he agreed with you. I made his position look like a less sophisticated version of my own. Now, if he continues to oppose me, he looks like he is opposing Egypt's interests as I defined them. And the noble saw me listen to him, treat him respectfully, incorporate his concerns. Half of them will think I am on his side. The other half will see that I am more clever than Ganymedes." It did not end the threat completely. Ganymedes was still plotting, still dangerous, but I had bought time and made his path harder. The small problem was contained, at least temporarily. 3 weeks after Delius left, his ship returned. I watched from my balcony as it entered the harbor, my heart beating faster. Charmian stood beside me. "Whatever the answer is, we will adapt," she said quietly. The answer came within an hour. Delius was brought to my study, and this time he was smiling. "Your Majesty," he said with a much deeper bow than he had given the first time, "Marcus Antonius accepts your invitation. He will come to Alexandria. He asks only that you receive him with the honors due to a member of the Triumvirate and Rome's representative in the East." I felt a rush of triumph so intense it made me dizzy. He was coming. He was coming to me, on my ground, my terms. The first move was mine. "Of course," I said calmly, as if I had never doubted. "Tell him that I will receive him as befits his position and his partnership with Caesar. He will be most welcome." After Delius left to prepare for Antony's arrival, I stood at the window, watching the sea where soon Antony's fleet would appear. Charmian and Iris joined me. "It begins," Iris said softly. "No," I said, "it has already begun. What happens next determines everything. We must plan carefully. Antony expects a political negotiation. We will give him something far more memorable. We will give him a fantasy. We will make him feel like a god, and when a man feels like a god, he will do anything to keep that feeling." "How?" Charmian asked. I smiled. "You will see. But first I need to understand him better. Delius gave me information, but I need more. Apollodorus, send agents to Tarsus. I want to know everything about Antony. What he eats, what he drinks, what makes him laugh, what music he enjoys, what kind of women he has loved before. Everything. I want to know him better than he knows himself." Over the next 2 weeks, information flowed back to me. Antony liked strong wine and rich food. He enjoyed theater and music, especially dramatic performances. He had a taste for Egyptian and Greek culture, often wearing Greek clothes and attending philosophical discussions, though his understanding was superficial. He loved to be the center of attention at parties. He was generous to his friends, but cruel to his enemies. He was intensely physical, both in violence and in pleasure, and most importantly, he was insecure about his education and his sophistication compared to Caesar and Octavian. With this information, I began to plan. Not just a reception, but an experience. Something he would never forget. Something that would make him see me not just as a client queen to be managed, but as a partner, a mystery, a prize worth winning. I called my advisors together in my study: Charmian, Iris, Apollodorus, and Mardion, the eunuch who managed my household. Mardion was elderly, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. efficient, and ruthlessly organized. Between the 5 of us, we had managed to keep me alive and on the throne through coups, invasions, and court intrigues. Antony will arrive in approximately 10 days, I said. When he does, he needs to feel like he has entered another world. Not just Egypt, but something magical, something beyond the ordinary. I want every sense engaged. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. I want him overwhelmed and enchanted. Ideas? What followed was hours of planning, refining, arguing, and perfecting. By the end, we had a plan that was audacious, expensive, and if it worked, would change everything. The macro challenge remained, securing Egypt's future by binding Rome to me without being conquered by Rome. The immediate obstacle, impressing Antony enough that he saw me as essential, valuable, worthy of protection rather than conquest. And the small problem that was still simmering, Ganymedes and his faction, who were watching everything I did, waiting for a mistake, ready to present their petition if I seemed weak. I did not sleep much those 10 days. There was too much to prepare, too much at stake. Late at night, I would stand on my balcony, watching the sea, wondering if I was brilliant or insane. Probably both. I was betting everything on my ability to read this man I had never met, to craft an experience that would entrance him, and to walk the knife's edge between being his lover and being his property. On the morning that Antony's fleet was spotted approaching Alexandria's harbor, I dressed in my most magnificent robes and assembled my court. But I did not go to the docks. Let him come to me. Let him walk through Alexandria's streets and see the city's wealth and power. Let him climb the hill to the palace and understand what he was dealing with. I waited on my throne in the great audience chamber, surrounded by courtiers, guards, and the full display of pharaonic power. When Antony finally entered, I was ready. And so was he.
Marcus Antonius entered my throne room like a man who owned it, and I had to admire the confidence, even as I planned to dismantle it. He was exactly as Delius had described, yet somehow more. Taller than I expected, perhaps 6 feet, with the build of a lifelong soldier. His shoulders were broad, his arms muscular, his legs powerful beneath the short military tunic he wore under a purple-bordered toga. His face was handsome in that rough, masculine Roman way. Strong jaw, broad forehead, nose that had been broken at least once and healed slightly crooked. His hair was dark brown with silver at the temples, curling slightly, and his eyes were dark and intelligent, despite the slight redness that suggested he had been drinking the night before. He wore his power casually, almost carelessly. The toga was expensive but not ostentatious, draped in the military style rather than the elaborate senatorial fashion. His sandals were good leather but worn from travel. He wore a single ring, gold, with a carved carnelian, and a simple gold chain around his neck. Behind him came a retinue of perhaps 20 men, a mix of Roman officers and Greek secretaries, all watching me with undisguised curiosity. But it was Antony himself who commanded attention. He had charisma, that indefinable quality that makes people want to follow you. When he smiled, which he did as he approached my throne, it was a smile that invited you to share a joke, to be part of his circle, to bask in his approval. I understood immediately why soldiers loved him. "Your Majesty," he said in Greek, his accent decent but unmistakably Roman. His voice was deep and carried well, a voice trained to command armies. "I am honored by your invitation. Alexandria is even more magnificent than the stories suggest." I inclined my head regally, but did not stand. This was deliberate. In Egyptian protocol, the pharaoh does not rise for visitors, even important ones. Let him come to me.
Marcus Antonius, I replied in Latin, which surprised him. I saw his eyebrows rise slightly. Welcome to Egypt. We are pleased to receive Rome's representative in the East. I trust your journey was comfortable. Very much so, he said, switching smoothly to Latin. Your hospitality has been exceptional. We were circling each other verbally, testing, probing. I could feel the entire room watching us, my courtiers on one side, his men on the other, everyone trying to read the dynamic. Who would dominate? Who would submit? Please, I said, gesturing to a chair that had been placed before my throne. Sit. We have much to discuss, but first you must be tired. Wine? At my signal, servants appeared with wine and refreshments. This was another test. Would he accept my hospitality, putting himself in the position of guest? Or would he try to maintain the stance of a superior granting an audience? He sat, taking the wine cup with a smile. To friendship between Rome and Egypt, he said, raising the cup. To friendship, I agreed, drinking. The formal audience lasted perhaps an hour. We discussed politics, trade, the situation in the eastern provinces. Antony questioned me about my actions during the Civil War, and I explained clearly and without apology. I had supported Caesar's faction. Some of my ships had been delayed or captured by weather and hostile forces. I had never supported Brutus or Cassius. My loyalty was to Egypt first, but I had no love for Caesar's murderers. He listened, asking sharp questions. He was not stupid, whatever some Roman snobs said about him. He understood power and strategy, even if he lacked patience for legal niceties. Caesar spoke of you often, he said at one point, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Curiosity? Jealousy? Caesar was kind, I said. He was also the most remarkable man I ever met. His death was a tragedy for Rome and for the world. This was true, and Antony knew it. Whatever complex feelings he had about Caesar, his former commander and rival, he had loved him too. We have avenged him, Antony said. Brutus and Cassius are dead. The republic they tried to save is finished. Now we build something new. And what is that? I asked. What does Rome become after Caesar? He smiled, but there was something sad in it. That depends on many things. On whether the Triumvirate can hold together, on whether Octavian and I can learn to share power, on whether we can secure the East and deal with Parthia. Parthia, Rome's eternal problem, the great empire that had destroyed Crassus and his legions, that represented everything Rome could not conquer, and suddenly I saw an opening. Parthia is a problem for both of us, I said carefully. They threaten Egypt's eastern borders as much as Rome's. Perhaps that is something we should discuss in greater depth, but not here, not formally. I glanced meaningfully at the assembled courtiers and officers. These matters are too sensitive for public discussion. Antony understood immediately. I was offering him a private audience, a chance to speak without witnesses, to negotiate real terms rather than posture for our respective courts. I would welcome that, Your Majesty. Then let us meet tonight, after the formal reception feast. I will send word to your quarters. The feast that night was the first stage of my plan. I wanted to impress Antony, but not yet overwhelm him. Show him wealth and culture, but save the real spectacle for later. The meal was held in one of the palace's great dining halls, a room with a painted ceiling showing the night sky, walls covered in silk hangings from China and India, and tables laden with gold and silver plate. The food was a careful blend of Egyptian, Greek, and Roman cuisine. Roasted duck with date sauce, fish from the Nile prepared with Egyptian spices, lamb cooked in the Greek style, Roman garum sauce for those who wanted it, Fresh bread, cheeses, fruits, and vegetables arranged in elaborate displays. Wine from Chios, the world's best, served in gold cups. I dressed for the feast in a gown that blended Egyptian and Greek styles, pleated linen in deep red, with a gold belt and collar of gold and emeralds. My hair was arranged in elaborate curls woven with gold thread, and I wore the uraeus, the golden cobra crown that marked me as pharaoh. I wanted Antony to see that I could be both the exotic Eastern queen of his imagination and a sophisticated Hellenistic ruler who understood Greek and Roman culture. The entertainment was carefully chosen. Musicians played Egyptian harps and Greek lyres. Dancers performed in the graceful Egyptian style, their movements telling stories of gods and goddesses. Poets recited verses in both Greek and Latin. It was cultured, elegant, impressive, but not excessive. Antony seemed to enjoy himself. He drank heavily, as expected, but he held his wine well. He laughed at the entertainment, complimented the food, and engaged in witty conversation with those seated near him. I watched him carefully, noting how he interacted with others. He was generous with praise, quick to laugh, tactile, touching people's shoulders or arms when he spoke to them. He flirted with the serving women, but not aggressively. He told stories well, making himself the hero, but in a self-deprecating way that invited laughter rather than resentment. I also noticed how his eyes kept returning to me. Not constantly, not in an obvious way, but regularly, checking on me, trying to read me, interested. After the feast, as the guests began to disperse, I caught his eye and gave a small nod. He understood. An hour later, a servant led him through the quieter passages of the palace to my private study. This was a risk. Meeting him alone could be seen as improper, even scandalous. But I needed to speak with him without the performance of a public audience. I needed to see the real man, and I needed him to see the real me, or at least the version of the real me that I wanted him to see. When he arrived, I was standing by the window looking out at the harbor where lights from ships twinkled like stars on the water. I had changed into simpler clothes, a plain linen dress in pale blue with my hair loose and only a simple gold chain around my neck. No crown, no formal regalia, just a woman.
"Your Majesty," Antony said, and I heard genuine surprise in his voice. He had expected the queen on her throne. Instead, he found me like this. "Please, when we are private, call me Cleopatra," I said, turning to face him. "May I call you Antonius, or do you prefer Marcus?" "Antonius is fine," he said, still looking slightly off balance. "Perfect. Wine?" I gestured to a table where I had set out wine and cups, not servants, just us. He poured for both of us, another small gesture of equality. "Thank you for seeing me privately," he said. "I imagine there will be talk." I laughed. "Antonius, there is always talk. If I worried about gossip, I would never leave my chambers. Let them talk. We have serious matters to discuss." "Parthia," he said, "among other things. But first, let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Why did you really come to Egypt? Not the official reasons, the real ones." He studied me for a long moment, weighing how much truth to share. Then he smiled, and it was a different smile than the public one, more genuine, more weary. "Because Octavian is consolidating power in Rome," he said bluntly. "Because the Triumvirate is a fiction, and everyone knows it. Because eventually he and I will go to war. And when that happens, I need the East secured. I need allies. I need resources. And Egypt has both." Honesty. I had not expected quite this much truth. It was refreshing
and also alarming. If he was this frank, it meant he either trusted me already, or he was confident enough in his power that my knowing his plans did not matter. "Thank you," I said, "for your honesty. Let me be equally honest. Egypt is rich, but vulnerable. Rome could invade tomorrow and probably win. My army is small, my fleet adequate but not overwhelming. I need protection from Rome, but I cannot afford to become a Roman province. I need a partnership, not a master. And you think I can provide that? I think you need what I have, and I need what you have. That is the basis of any good partnership. You need money, grain, a secure base in the east. I need Roman military power protecting Egypt's borders, keeping other Roman generals from getting ideas about conquest. We both need to deal with Parthia, and neither of us benefits from Octavian becoming sole ruler of Rome." Antony laughed. It was a real laugh, delighted and surprised. "You are direct. I like that. Most people, especially most queens, dance around these topics with elaborate courtesies and implied meanings. I am not most queens," I said simply. "No," he agreed. "You are not. Caesar told me that. I did not quite believe him. I thought he was besotted with a beautiful woman and could not see clearly. And now? Now I think he saw very clearly indeed. You are dangerous, Cleopatra. Only to my enemies. To my friends and allies, I am the most loyal person you will ever meet. Ask yourself, did I ever betray Caesar? Did I ever work against his interests? Even after his death, I have honored his memory and protected his son, our son, Caesarion. I had deliberately not mentioned him earlier, but now I laid that card on the table. Antony's expression shifted, became more complicated. "How is the boy?" he asked carefully. "He is well. He is 3 years old, healthy, intelligent. He has his father's eyes." This was true. Caesarion had inherited Caesar's sharp, calculating gaze. He someday will rule Egypt, but he is still a child and needs protection. I was reminding Antony that I had Caesar's son, which gave me legitimacy in Roman eyes, but also made me vulnerable. Octavian would want Caesarion dead. Any potential rival to his claim as Caesar's heir was a threat. "I would never harm the boy," Antony said quietly. "Whatever else happens, I promise you that." I believed him. Antony was many things, but he was not cruel to children. This mattered to me more than I wanted to admit. "Thank you," I said. "That means a great deal." We talked for hours that night, and it was the most honest political conversation I had ever had with a Roman. We discussed strategy for dealing with Parthia, resources Egypt could provide for a military campaign, how to structure our alliance to satisfy Roman pride while preserving Egyptian sovereignty, how to manage Octavian's inevitable suspicion and hostility. But we also talked about other things, about Caesar and what his death had meant, about the weight of power and the loneliness of command, about the burden of living up to impossible expectations. I told him about growing up as the middle child in a dysfunctional royal family, watching siblings murder each other for the throne. He told me about growing up in Caesar's shadow, always the second, never quite good enough. As dawn approached and the sky began to lighten outside my windows, I realized something that both excited and frightened me. I liked him, not just as a political tool, but as a person. He was charming, yes, but also genuine in a way most powerful men were not. He acknowledged his flaws. He laughed at himself. He listened when I spoke, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk. This was dangerous. I needed him to fall for me, not the other way around. But perhaps, I thought, perhaps I could allow myself to enjoy his company while keeping my larger goals clear. "I should let you rest," Antony said finally, standing. "You have been more than generous with your time. Before you go, I want to show you something. Tomorrow evening, will you be my guest? Not a formal event, something more intimate." His eyes lit up with interest and curiosity. "Of course. What should I expect?" "Expect nothing," I said, with a mysterious smile. "That way you will be surprised." After he left, I sat at my window watching the sunrise, feeling both triumphant and troubled. The evening had gone well, better than well. I had connected with Antony, established rapport, laid the groundwork for an alliance. But I had also genuinely enjoyed his company, which complicated things. Charmian found me there an hour later. She took one look at my face and said, "You like him." That is irrelevant. It is very relevant. It makes you vulnerable. Perhaps, but it also makes it easier to do what needs to be done. If I have to pretend to like him, he will sense it eventually. If I genuinely enjoy his company, the performance becomes easier. "Just be careful," Charmian warned. "Roman men are used to taking what they want. If he decides he wants Egypt, your liking him won't stop him." She was right, of course, but I thought I understood Antony well enough now. He wanted to be special. He wanted to be the hero of his own story, not the villain. If I could make him see himself as my protector rather than my conqueror, as my partner rather than my master, I could manage this.
My enthusiasm, making it sound like I was ready to commit enormous resources immediately. I knew this would panic Ganymedes and his faction. Sure enough, that evening, Ganymedes requested an audience. I granted it, with Charmian and Apollodorus present as witnesses. He came with two other nobles, Lord Patinophotes and Lady Side. Patinophotes was elderly, perhaps 70, with a long white beard and the traditional shaved head of an Egyptian priest. He wore robes of white linen and carried himself with dignity. Lady Side was younger, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. She came from an old Egyptian family and had never hidden her disdain for the Ptolemaic dynasty's Greek heritage. "Your Majesty," Ganymedes began, "we come with concerns about Egypt's future." "I am always interested in concerns about Egypt's future," I said pleasantly. "Please, speak freely." "We have heard that you are planning to commit Egyptian resources to Rome's war with Parthia. Ships, troops, gold. Is this true?" "I am considering various options for strengthening our alliance with Rome," I said carefully. "Nothing is decided." "Your Majesty, with respect, this is madness," Lady Side said, her voice sharp. "Rome does not need more power. Rome needs to be checked. If we pour our wealth into Roman wars, we gain nothing but Rome's continued dominance over us." "And if we do not support Rome," I countered, "Rome invades us and takes what they want anyway. At least this way, we are partners, not victims." "There are other options," Ganymedes said. "Parthia would welcome an Egyptian alliance. Together, we could resist Rome." And there it was, treason. Advocating alliance with Rome's greatest enemy, while a Roman general was literally staying in my palace. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was noting every word. "You'd forget yourself, Ganymedes. You forget who I am and what I have accomplished. I have kept Egypt independent through civil war and chaos. I have negotiated with the most powerful men in Rome as an equal. I have given Egypt an heir who carries Caesar's blood. And I have done all of this while men like you whispered that I was not Egyptian enough, not Greek enough, not Roman enough. I am the pharaoh. I am Egypt. And I will do whatever is necessary to keep this kingdom safe and prosperous." "By submitting to Rome?" Lady Side spat. "By making Rome need us," I corrected. "There is a difference, though apparently it is too subtle for you to grasp. You want me to defy Rome publicly, to make grand gestures of independence that would result in Roman legions crossing our borders within months. You would sacrifice Egypt's future for the satisfaction of gestures.
That is not leadership. That is suicide. And aligning with Parthia? Patinafotes asked quietly. He at least had the intelligence to sound uncertain rather than defiant. Would be equally foolish, I said. Parthia is far away. Rome is on our doorstep. Moreover, Parthia has no interest in Egyptian independence. They would use us and discard us just as readily as Rome would. The only difference is that Parthia is weaker, which means aligning with them would be choosing the losing side. Is that what you want? For Egypt to back the wrong horse and be trampled? I let the silence extend, watching them. Patinafotes looked troubled. Lady Sede looked angry but uncertain. Ganymedes looked defiant. You have a choice, I said. You can support your queen in Egypt's policy, or you can continue to plot against both. But understand this. If you choose opposition, if you present your petition, if you continue to undermine Egypt's diplomacy, you are not being patriots. You are being traitors. And I deal with traitors harshly. It was a threat, clear and unambiguous. Ganymedes opened his mouth to respond, but Patinafotes put a hand on his arm. Your Majesty, the old priest said carefully, we are loyal to Egypt. We only wish to be heard. You have been heard, I said. I have listened to your concerns. I have explained my reasoning. Now you must decide whether to trust your queen's judgment or to continue this dangerous game. I dismissed them, and Apollodorus followed them out quietly. I knew what would happen next. Patinafotes would urge caution. Lady Sede would waver. But Ganymedes would not stop. He was too committed, too certain of his righteousness. That night, Apollodorus reported that Ganymedes had sent a message to known Parthian agents in Alexandria, suggesting a meeting to discuss mutual interests. It was exactly the evidence I needed. The next morning, Ganymedes was arrested for treason, specifically for communicating with agents of a hostile foreign power while Egypt was negotiating with Rome. I had him tried before a council of priests and nobles, presented the evidence, and let them render judgment. They found him guilty. The sentence was exile. Not death. I could have executed him, but exile served my purposes better. It removed the threat without creating a martyr. The small problem was solved. But as these things happen, solving one problem created another. Lady Sede, though she had not been arrested, became a vocal critic. She began spreading rumors that I had fabricated the evidence against Ganymedes, that I was so besotted with Antony that I was betraying Egypt's interests. The rumors were not widely believed, but they created doubt, and doubt was dangerous. Worse, some of Antony's officers heard the rumors and reported them back to him. I learned this from my own agents. Now Antony was hearing that the Egyptian queen's own people doubted her, that she might not be able to deliver the stability and support she promised. This was the new secondary problem. I needed to demonstrate my control, my legitimacy, and my value to Antony. And I needed to do it in a way that overshadowed the rumors and made them seem petty and irrelevant. Which brought me to that evening's plan, the intimate dinner I had promised Antony. This would not be a state dinner or a political negotiation. This would be theater. Seduction, yes, but not the crude kind. I was going to seduce his imagination, his ego, his deepest desires. I was going to make him feel like he had stepped into a dream. And if it worked, he would be mine, not just politically, but emotionally. And that would solve so many problems at once.
It would take years. It would require every ounce of my intelligence, cunning, and will. It would mean building alliances throughout the East, modernizing Egypt's military, expanding our naval power, cornering markets on grain and gold and strategic goods. It would mean becoming not just a queen, but an empress in all but name. And when Antony finally came back to me, as I believed he would not be coming to rescue a helpless kingdom. He would be coming to partner with a power that rivaled Rome itself. That was how I would bewitch Rome, without leaving my palace. Not by seducing one general, but by making Egypt itself irresistible.
by becoming so essential to the power structure of the Mediterranean that Rome could not function without us. I called Charmian, Apollodorus, Iris, and Mardian to my study. When they arrived, I stood before the map of the known world that covered one wall. "Everything changes today," I told them. "We have been playing defense, trying to survive. Now we go on offense. We are going to rebuild Egypt into a power that Rome cannot ignore and cannot conquer. And we start right now." They looked at each other, then back at me. And then Charmian smiled. "Tell us what you need," she said. And I did. The 3 years that followed Antony's departure were the most transformative of my reign. I had ruled Egypt for nearly a decade by then, but always reactively, always responding to crises, always surviving. Now, for the first time, I was building something proactive, something that would outlast any individual alliance or romance. I started with the military. Egypt's army had long been neglected, relying too heavily on mercenaries and too little on native forces. I recruited heavily from Upper Egypt, from Nubian communities, from Greek settlers who had made Egypt their home. I hired the best military trainers from across the Mediterranean, former Roman centurions, Greek hoplite commanders, Persian cavalry experts. I modernized our weapons, our training, our tactics. But more importantly, I focused on the Navy. Egypt's wealth came from trade, and trade moved by sea. I commissioned 50 new warships, designed by the best naval architects from Rhodes and Phoenicia. Not just biremes and triremes, but larger vessels capable of carrying more marines, more weapons, more supplies. I established naval basins along the coast and trained crews relentlessly. Apollodorus took charge of this expansion. He had been a soldier in his youth, and he understood warfare in ways that most of my courtiers did not. He was ruthless in his standards, dismissing commanders who could not meet his expectations, promoting talented officers regardless of their birth or connections. Within 2 years, Egypt had a navy that could challenge any power in the eastern Mediterranean, except Rome itself. And even Rome would have to think twice before attacking us by sea. While Apollodorus built our military, I worked on the economic side. Egypt's wealth came primarily from grain, but I diversified. I invested heavily in papyrus production, cornering much of the market on this essential material for writing. I expanded our glass-making industry, producing luxury goods that were prized throughout the Roman world. I negotiated exclusive trading agreements with Arabian merchants for frankincense and myrrh, with Indian traders for spices and silk, with African kingdoms for ivory and gold. Most importantly, I positioned Egypt as the indispensable middleman in East-West trade. Goods from India and Arabia and Africa flowed to Egyptian ports, enriching our treasury with tariffs and fees. Roman merchants needed Egyptian cooperation to access these goods. I made sure they understood that disrupting Egypt meant disrupting the entire trade network. Mardian managed much of this economic expansion, proving himself to be as brilliant with numbers and logistics as he was with household management. He established warehouses throughout Egypt, created a sophisticated banking system that rivaled anything in Rome, and maintained detailed records of every transaction. When I needed to know our exact financial position, he could tell me within an hour. But I also worked on softer forms of power. I cultivated relationships with every significant power in the Eastern Mediterranean. I sent embassies to Judea, to Syria, to the various kingdoms of Asia Minor. I offered loans, military assistance, trade agreements, whatever was needed to build networks of obligation and friendship. I wanted to create a situation where any Roman attempt to conquer Egypt would disrupt so many other relationships that it would be politically and economically costly. Charmian proved invaluable in this diplomatic work. She had an instinct for people, could read motivations and desires with uncanny accuracy.
She traveled extensively on my behalf, meeting with foreign rulers, establishing connections, gathering intelligence. She built a network of informants and agents that stretched from Alexandria to Athens, from Jerusalem to Damascus. Information flowed to me constantly, allowing me to anticipate problems and opportunities. And Iris, my dear Iris, took on a different role. She became my curator of culture and propaganda. She understood something crucial. Power is not just about armies and gold, but about perception. She orchestrated festivals, commissioned artwork, sponsored poets and historians. She made sure that Egypt was seen not as a declining ancient kingdom, but as a vibrant center of culture and learning. She made sure that I was portrayed not as a desperate queen seeking Roman protection, but as a powerful ruler in my own right. We commissioned statues showing me as Isis, as the new Nile bringing life to Egypt. We spread stories of my wisdom, my learning, my generosity. We made sure that every ship leaving Alexandria carried tales of Egyptian splendor. We created a mystique, a sense that Egypt was special, unique, touched by the divine. During these 3 years, I thought about Antony constantly. I received occasional messages from him, always carefully worded to avoid giving Octavian's spies anything useful, but full of hidden meanings that I learned to decode. He was playing his role, being the dutiful husband to Octavia, the loyal colleague to Octavian. But he was also laying groundwork, building alliances in the East, positioning himself for the eventual break that we both knew was coming. Octavia, from what I heard, was everything I was not. Virtuous, modest, devoted to her husband and her brother. She managed Antony's household in Rome with efficiency and grace. She bore him children, 2 daughters. She was, by all accounts, a good wife and a good woman. I hated her, not because of who she was, but because of what she represented. She was the Roman ideal, the proper patrician matron, everything that Roman society approved of, while I was the foreign queen, the exotic other, the scandalous lover. She had the legitimacy of marriage and family. I had only the memory of a few passionate weeks and a promise that might never be kept. But I also pitied her, in a strange way, because she was in love with a man who was in love with someone else. She must have known, on some level, that Antony's heart was not fully hers, that part of him was always looking east, towards Egypt, towards me. During this time, I did not take other lovers. There were, certainly, opportunities, kings and princes and generals who came to Alexandria and made it clear they would welcome my attention. But I could not. Not because I was being faithful to Antony in any conventional sense, but because I had given him something I had never given anyone else, my actual heart, not just the performance of it. And I could not take that back, could not divide it, even though he was thousands of miles away married to another woman. Caesarion grew during these years from a small child into a young boy. He was 6 years old now, old enough to begin his education in earnest. I made sure he learned everything: Greek, Latin, Egyptian, mathematics, philosophy, military tactics, statecraft. I wanted him to be ready to rule whenever that day came. But more than that, I wanted him to understand the complexity of the world we lived in, the dangerous game of power and survival. He looked more like Caesar every day. The same sharp eyes, the same quick mind, the same ability to focus with absolute intensity on whatever interested him. But he had my temperament, thank the gods. Where Caesar had been cold and calculating, Caesarion was warm and curious. Where Caesar had been ruthless, Caesarion was compassionate. He would be a better ruler than his father, I thought, if I could keep him alive long enough to take the throne. One evening, as I was working in my study, Caesarion came to me with a question. He was supposed to be in bed, but he had a habit of sneaking out when something was bothering him. He stood in the doorway in his sleeping tunic. "Mother," he said, "why did Marcus Antonius leave? Did we do something wrong?"
I set down my stylus and looked at him. How do you explain adult complications to a child? How do you tell him that the man he had come to see as almost a father figure had left to marry someone else for political reasons? We did nothing wrong, I said gently. Antonius had responsibilities in Rome. Sometimes adults have to make difficult choices between what they want and what they must do. Will he come back? Caesarion asked. I hope so, I said honestly. But even if he does not, we will be all right. Do you know why? Why? Because we are strong, because we are prepared, because we do not need anyone else to save us. We save ourselves. Caesarion nodded slowly, processing this. Then he came and climbed into my lap, even though he was getting too big for it. I held him, feeling his warmth, his trust, his vulnerability. This was what I was fighting for, not just Egypt as an abstract concept, but this specific child's future, his right to grow up free, to rule his kingdom, to live without fear of Roman conquest. I will be a good king someday, he said quietly, like you are a good queen. You will be better than me, I said, kissing the top of his head. You will rule in peace, not in crisis. That is what I am working toward. A world where you can simply be a king, not a survivor. The turning point came in the 3rd year after Antony's departure. Octavian made his move, just as I had predicted he would. He began maneuvering to strip Antony of his eastern provinces, claiming that Antony was neglecting his duties, that he was too influenced by Eastern customs, that he was not properly Roman anymore. It was all political theater, preparing the ground for an eventual showdown. Antony, from what my spies reported, finally saw through Octavian's pretense of brotherhood. The marriage to Octavia had been a trap, a way to control him and isolate him from his power base in the east, and Octavian was preparing to spring that trap. The message I had been waiting for arrived on an autumn morning. A ship flying Antony's colors sailed into Alexandria's harbor, and my heart began to race before I even saw the messenger. I received him in my private study with only Charmian present. The messenger was a Greek officer named Alexis, one of Antony's most trusted subordinates. He was dusty from travel, exhausted, but his eyes were bright with urgency. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing, "Marcus Antonius sends his greetings and his love. He bids me tell you that the time has come. Octavian has revealed his true intentions. The Triumvirate is dead in all but name. Antonius asks if Egypt's offer of alliance still stands, and he asks if you still wait for him." I felt a rush of emotions so intense it was almost painful. Relief, joy, fear, vindication, love, all mixed together. I had waited 3 years. I had built Egypt into a power. I had prepared for this moment, and now it was here. "Tell Antonius that Egypt's offer stands," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Tell him that our alliance is ready to be activated. Tell him that our fleet is at his disposal. Our treasury is open to him. Our ports are his bases. Tell him that Egypt welcomes him, not as a Roman general, but as a partner and friend." "And the other question?" asked Alexis carefully. "Does your Majesty still wait for him?" I smiled. "Tell him that Cleopatra has been waiting. Tell him to come home." Alexis bowed and left to carry my message back to Antony. After he was gone, Charmian and I stood in silence for a moment. "It is really happening," she said quietly. "Yes," I said. "Everything we have been working toward, everything we have been building. Now we will see if it was enough." "Are you ready?" I thought about that question. Was I ready for Antony to return? For the relationship to resume? For the political and military complications that would come with openly allying him with Octavian? For the war that was now inevitable? "I have to be ready," I said. "There is no other choice." Antony returned to Alexandria 6 weeks later. This time, he did not come as a visitor or a Roman representative. He came as a partner, bringing with him much of his eastern legions, his fleet, his wealth, his power. He came as a man choosing his future, and he had chosen me. I went to the harbor to meet him, and this time I wore full royal regalia. I was not just a woman greeting her lover, I was a queen welcoming an ally. The distinction mattered. When he walked down the gangplank and saw me, he stopped and smiled. It was the same smile I remembered, warm and genuine and slightly overwhelmed. 3 years had changed him. There was more gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes, a weariness that had not been there before. But his eyes were the same, and when they met mine, I saw recognition and relief and love. "Your Majesty," he said formally, because we had an audience. "Thank you for your hospitality." "Welcome back to Alexandria, Antonius," I said, equally formal. "Egypt is honored by your presence." But later, when we were finally alone in my chambers, the formality dropped away. He pulled me into his arms, and I let myself be held, feeling 3 years of loneliness and worry finally release. "I'm sorry," he said in my hair. "I am sorry it took so long. I'm sorry for everything you went through alone." "You did what you had to do," I said, "and so did I. But now we are here, together, and we have work to do." He pulled back to look at me. "You are different, stronger, more formidable." "I had to be," I said. "I could not just wait for you to save me. I had to save myself, save Egypt." "And you did," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "Cleopatra, what you have built here in 3 years is remarkable. Your fleet, your allies, your economic power. You have made Egypt into something Rome cannot simply conquer." That was the plan. To become so valuable that even Octavian would have to think twice about attacking us. And now, with you and your legions allied with us, we are even stronger. "We will need to be," Antony said grimly. "Octavian is preparing for war. He will paint me as a traitor who chose an Eastern queen over Rome. He will say I have been bewitched, corrupted, turned into something un-Roman anymore." "Let him say what he wants," I said. "The truth is that you have chosen the side that will win. Egypt and the East will defeat Octavian and his Romans, and when we do, we will reshape the world." It was bold talk, perhaps too bold. The war that was coming would be the greatest conflict the Mediterranean had seen since Caesar's civil war. It would determine the future of Rome, of Egypt, of the entire known world. And I had just committed Egypt fully to one side. But I believed in what I said. Together, Antony and I commanded enormous resources, his legions and my fleet, his Roman military expertise and my strategic position, his network of Roman allies, and my Eastern connections. If we could coordinate properly, if we could maintain unity, if we could outmaneuver Octavian politically and militarily, we could win. Over the following months, we worked together to prepare. We combined our forces, planned our strategy, reached out to potential allies. We formally announced our partnership, sending envoys throughout the East to proclaim that Egypt and Antony stood together against Octavian's tyranny. It was theater, yes, but theater with political purpose. It showed that our alliance was not just military, but dynastic. It showed that we were building something lasting.
Octavian, as expected, used this as propaganda. He told Rome that Antony had gone native, that he was planning to move the capital of Rome to Alexandria, that he intended to make me Empress of Rome itself. Most of it was exaggeration or outright lies, but some Romans believed it. Octavian was skilled at manipulating public opinion. But I did not care what Rome thought anymore. I cared what the East thought. And the East saw a powerful queen and a strong general creating a partnership that could resist Roman imperialism. They saw an alternative to Octavian's vision of Rome swallowing the world. Many rallied to our side. One evening, as Antony and I sat on my balcony overlooking the sea, watching the sunset,
He turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Choosing this path? If you had simply submitted to Rome years ago, your life would be easier. Caesarion would be safe. You would not be preparing for war." I considered the question seriously. If I had submitted, Egypt would cease to exist as anything but a Roman province. Caesarion would be a puppet at best, dead at worst. And I would be just another conquered queen, a footnote in Roman history. No, I do not regret it. This path is harder, more dangerous, but it is the only path that offers Egypt and my son a real future. "And us?" he asked. "Do you regret us?" I took his hand, intertwining our fingers. "You were supposed to be a tool, a Roman general I could use to protect Egypt, but you became something else. You became my partner, my love, my equal. No, Antonius, I do not regret us. Even if this ends badly, even if we lose everything, I will never regret what we built together." "We will not lose," he said fiercely. "We cannot. Too much depends on it." But I saw the uncertainty in his eyes, the same uncertainty I felt, because the truth was that we were taking an enormous gamble. We were betting everything: Egypt's future, our lives, our children's inheritance, on the belief that we could defeat Octavian. And Octavian was young, brilliant, ruthless, and controlled the resources of the Western Mediterranean. The war would come, soon, and it would determine everything. But sitting there on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple, with Antony's hand in mine and Egypt's future hanging in the balance, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not the peace of security, but the peace of knowing I had done everything I could. I had planned, prepared, built, and fought. I had turned Egypt from a vulnerable kingdom into a genuine power. I had found an ally who was also a true partner. I had never left my palace to bewitch Rome, but Rome had come to me. Whatever happened next, whatever the war brought, I would face it with my eyes open and my head high. I was Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, last of the Ptolemies, mother of Caesarion, lover of Antony, and builder of dreams. And my story was far from over. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the palace, I could hear Caesarion laughing at something his tutor had said. Somewhere in the harbor, our combined fleets rocked gently at anchor, ready for war. Somewhere in Rome, Octavian was plotting our destruction. But here, in this moment, I was content, because I had achieved what I set out to do. I had bewitched Rome without leaving my palace. I had made myself essential, powerful, unforgettable. And whatever the future held, no one would ever be able to erase the mark I had made on history. Antony squeezed my hand. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I smiled. "I am thinking that the story is not over. It is only just beginning." And it was true. The great conflict, the battle that would determine the future of the Mediterranean world, still lay ahead. But I was ready. Egypt was ready. We had built something remarkable, something that would echo through the ages. This is how I, Cleopatra, bewitched Rome without leaving my palace, not with magic or supernatural beauty, but with intelligence, strategy, patience, and the willingness to take enormous risks. I made myself indispensable. I built a kingdom into a power. I found a partner who saw me as an equal. And I prepared for war while hoping for peace. The future is uncertain. War always is. But whatever comes, I know that Egypt has a fighting chance, that Caesarion has a future, that the story of Cleopatra will be remembered not as a footnote in Roman history, but as a chapter in its own right. And if that is not victory, it is as close as any queen in my position could hope for. The night deepens around us, and inside the palace, preparations continue. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new dangers, new opportunities. But tonight, I rest. Tomorrow, I fight. This is my story. This is how I bewitched Rome. And this is only the beginning.